Empire.
Hello and welcome to another live stream edition of the John Kahn Report. Always appreciate you tuning in. Do me a favor, you go subscribe to the show on Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, wherever. And if you want to find us on YouTube, if you're watching this later, Empire Media, AMPIRE. Always much appreciated when you tune in. You can read my work on ESPN.com. And as you can see, a little bit of false advertising today because I said Bram Weinstein, the voice of Commanders, is going to be on here. If you're watching, that's not Bram. That's Nicki Jhabvala from the Washington Post. So, Nicki, I appreciate the last-minute fill-in, but I will say this. I know everybody's going to like this. I'm going to get 100 messages on here on YouTube saying you need more Nicki. So here you go. I'm giving the people what they want. Thanks, Nicki.
I do what I can. If your ratings plummet, it's not my fault.
My ratings are going to go up here in a few minutes. So I do appreciate it. And, I want to start
promise
with
everybody donuts for this, by the way. Right, Bram? Bram promised.
Bram always brings donuts on Fridays, and that's something that but that's something that I think is always much appreciated from our end because that's what he does. But Nicki, I want to start with what Ron Rivera talked about today. And, one of the things he talked about, what's he most proud of? And he said, changing the culture. Do you feel the culture has been changed?
Yes, I do. I mean, and a lot of it is due simply to the fact that Dan Snyder is out of the building. But I do think that Ron's legacy requires nuance and context. The on-field product was not good. I mean, they couldn't get over 8 wins, and they only reached 8 wins once, reached the playoffs once. But Ron Rivera dealt with stuff that no other coach has had to deal with and did it probably better than any coach could. Again, this is not defending the on-field product. That should have been better. I think everybody expected it to be better. But when you are coaching a team that has no voice from ownership, and that ownership group is at least a part of or the center of 5, maybe more federal league-led, state-led investigations over, the financial dealings, over, allegations of sexual misconduct in the workplace. I mean, Ron Rivera was the voice of the team for much of his 4 years here, and that he took that on. I think he knew to a degree what it could be. I don't think anybody expected it would reach this level. Everything just fell apart. And he battled cancer.
And listen, I think, it can be difficult in our jobs because you have to parse everything, right?
Right.
You develop relationships with people because that's what you do as reporters.
Yeah.
We're very close to a situation, so you see the human side of it. And, you also see social media where it's either person A sucks and they want him out, or this person's the greatest, whatever. It's rarely that cut and dry with someone, but people who want the human side, we see it. So I think in this case, you see it. And you're right. It doesn't mean that someone's advocating saying, oh, he should stay in the job, or it was great because they haven't had a winning season.
Right.
We know that. Like, the football has not been good this year. We know that. You can say that, yes, they're if they make a change, which we all expect, that it's the right move.
Yeah. Both things can be true at the same time.
Correct. But you can also say, like, you've seen how Rivera's handled it. You've seen, like you said, that what he has had to deal with is infinitely more than what anybody else has had to deal with during the time as a coach here. Because it's, through name change and, pandemic, everybody had to deal with that. But then, the scandals or the investigations and, the DEA. I mean, it was everything.
Well, that he kind of brought on himself.
Well, that is his. That's right. That was part of his own doing. Absolutely.
Sure.
So, yes, absolutely. But then you're dealing with your own cancer that does take a toll out of you from going. It's not just that year and it's over. It's that year and then it lingers and it takes something out of you. Now, whether or not that had an impact on the situation, well, they couldn't find a quarterback. They didn't make enough good moves in the offseason, and I'm not going to write it off to well, he didn't have the same energy that can affect you in the season. It doesn't affect your decision making out of the season,
Right.
where I think they failed at times. But it does seem like it's been very weird, Nicki, in these press conferences to ask a guy where we all know what we're asking, which
Right.
is,
And he knows what we're
and he
asking.
knows,
And he knows what's coming, but what is he going to say? Yeah, I fully
right?
expect to get canned on. We all know it, but what is he supposed to say publicly? There's nothing he can say that will appease anybody at this point. Everybody's mad that they're 4-12. Everybody's just waiting for the end to come. But what is he really supposed to say in that situation? And like, again, I think the thing that Ron did the best during his tenure was shielding his players from the chaos that was around them. And there was so much chaos. I mean, we've heard it from Taylor Heineke. Listen to what Alex Smith has said over the years about what it was like in that locker room. I mean, this is unlike any other place in the NFL. And Ron did a good job of shielding it. Sometimes he made it worse, no doubt, with his comments, the RV thing, not every player left the building happy.
No,
as
they
Nick
did not.
Sundberg reminded recently in an interview with Grand Danny. But it's a lot to deal with one coach. And I think during his own cancer battle, the thing that I still can vividly see is he had trouble standing up on the sidelines. He had trouble walking to the sidelines. His wife, Stephanie, had to accompany him and walk with them. And he had who was a head of operations. Why am I blanking on his name now? With the Denver Broncos, with Sean Payton, Paul Kelly.
Oh, PK, yeah.
And it was Paul Kelly, right? That was by his side and would make sure he got water, that make sure he sat down and rested in between series. But he was determined to coach through it. But he was as frail as I've ever seen a football player get.
Well, there was. And because he never missed a game, and I think it was it Baltimore where you thought he was going to miss, and then
Baltimore was the worst I've seen him that game.
Yeah,
and
again, this does not excuse the W's and the L's.
You got to separate.
That's not what this is about.
Yeah, you got to separate it.
This is more, this is a humanistic look at the situation, and and I do remember, I remember talking to a player about a month or so ago. Is like they felt like when you talk about, I know for fans, and I know people who were here at times or whatever, they got tired of hearing the word culture because of ultimately it's like there's just way too much focused on that.
Sure.
I know that Rivera felt he was hired to change that clearly because it wasn't good, but it wasn't good because the guy who hired him,
right.
So that's a problem. But you and again, from a fan's perspective, okay, that's great. Culture's good. Where the hell are the W's? I get it. But I do know some players there, to your point about him shielding, they did like the culture of the first 3 years. I think this year maybe got away from some of that because you started to see it wasn't working. There were all these changes and it's not working. And then, you had some guys with contract situations or whatever, and then you have trades. I just think it made it a tough year.
Yeah.
But again, you got to win.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think anytime you go this long without having some sort of consistent success at quarterback, anybody is going to get fired. That's what the NFL is. You don't get a full season to try to prove yourself anymore. Not coaches, not quarterbacks. It's a shame. You think about how many great quarterbacks would have failed in the NFL nowadays. The Peyton Manning still set the record. I mean, John Elway, his rookie season was atrocious. I mean, you don't have the luxury of time anymore. It's hard to not wonder how many good quarterbacks are out there, but just were never given an opportunity to really prove himself. I think Jared Goff, what he's doing in Detroit with the right coaches and the right system, I think is amazing. He did well with Sean McVay in the early years, but it looks like with Ben Johnson, he's revived his career. But it takes that perfect storm, and you got to have a chance, and you got to have patience, and most players don't get it. Most coaches don't get it anymore.
Right. And that speaks to their quarterback situation with Howell, Sam Howell. You're going to have a new staff coming in. I can't imagine they're going to say, hey, let's be patient with him and develop him. Right. Not when you possibly have the second pick.
Right.
You agree?
And he just now had a full season. He wasn't even supposed to. He was technically benched for this game. He had a full season, and I'm talking about from week 18 last year. he didn't even get a full season, and like his play declined. I don't think they made a bad move by deciding to bench him. I could go either way on it. I to say that
I
that
think
could
he
help
needed to
his
come out.
confidence. Yeah, to say that benching him could help his confidence, I think is a ridiculous excuse.
I don't.
I mean, you're benching the guy. But my
I
point is
used to, we all used to play sports. If you got benched, I wasn't thinking,
oh
God, this
God,
is going to help.
yeah, especially in
I
such
will
a
say you can use it as motivation. You can use it to get better, and that will help your confidence because of what you overcome. But it's always about what you do on the other end, not the front end. The front end sucks.
exactly. And for such a public role, oh my God, yeah, nobody wants that. That doesn't help your confidence.
No.
But the point is, you don't get a full season anymore. And he declined as everything spiraled out of control. I think we may never get a full glimpse of what Sam Howell could have been, but most quarterbacks don't.
Yeah, no, you don't, and that's the thing here. And if they had finished 8 and 9 and they're picking in the middle or the 20s of the draft, then you can say, okay, see where you go. But they didn't finish. They're not going to finish 8 and 9. They're going to finish 4 and 13 most likely, with a high pick and a chance to grab somebody who another staff is going to say that's our guy. There is nobody in that building that will most likely no one in that building will have been there when Sam was drafted. It's hard as a guy who was picked in the 5th round, whether or not you thought he should have been, that's where he was picked. So the perception is shaped by that. The narrative around him is shaped by that, for fair or not. And, so they're going to go with their guy at some point in this draft, if nothing else, to bring in more options. So, I think that's something that, and that's just part of the NFL. And I think for Howell's case, he's young. Was he 23? I think this is not the end of his
is he even 23? Yeah.
I think he is 23. I think he turned 23, but it's not the end of his career. Like guys get like Taylor Heineke was on a couch at his sister's house. He got more chances and he's going to stick in the NFL for a few more years. Guys get other chances. He'll get another chance, whether it's here, next year, somewhere else, whatever. But you're going to roll. But the other thing that Rivera said too was that he'd like to think that he's left this in a better place. Mm-hmm. What do you think?
I think yes. Again, I think a lot of it is simply Dan Snyder leaving. That has been the biggest impetus for change. I mean, you look at the difference. You go back to training camp when everything was happy and expectations were high and everything was wonderful. I mean, those 10,000 fans that showed up daily it wasn't because of Ron. It wasn't because of the team per se. It was because there was hope with new ownership. But I do think, Ron, I do think he has left the team in a better place just in terms of, the types of players he's brought in. I don't think you can say that. You can't say that in terms of the record. I think he brought in more talent at some positions, but not others. I mean, the defensive line is a shell of itself. I think the receiving core is better. Will it be that way after free agency when Curtis is gone? Maybe not. But I think he helped some areas. I just think, given the circumstances, he did about what he could with the off-field stuff. I don't think his 4 years as a whole, just the trend of developing players, of finding new talent, of being innovative and finding new ways to win. I don't think that was.
It didn't do it.
No.
Yeah, and I sometimes wonder if there was a lot of emphasis placed on loyalty, familiarity, in some of these hirings. Yeah, and I think that's part. That's partly. Listen, when it goes wrong, you look at everything, and that's part of it, I think. And you look and say, you look at some of the things they're doing on defense or not doing, some things on offense doing or not doing, and you watch other teams, you're like, this team is doing that and it's working, right? This system has been updated and it's working here by doing this and implementing that. And then, the inability to fix the quarterback position. I think that's why he was really, really, really hopeful that Sam Howell would come through, because it would be something he could, quote unquote, leave to this franchise. And maybe down the road, like, who knows? Like I said, the book on Sam Howell's not over. I just like you kind of know where you have a good.
He's just not the clear franchise guy for 2024.
Correct. He didn't make it a no-brainer. He had to make it a no-brainer, and he didn't. And so, and so there are definitely some things, but I think you're right. I think there are some coaches I've covered here who, if they had been here the last few years, would have been an outright disaster the entire time. And I think your dogs agree with me.
Yeah,
your dogs.
So, Joey, do you want to stay in here, or are you just going to bark from over there?
But so I think there would have been some that would have handled a lot worse, and it would have been in a much worse spot. But some of those decisions, the draft class this year has not done enough. Will it does in the future? We'll see. This year, not enough. Yeah. And and I know somebody said there's none of them got in first round picks got an A grade. I think Jamin Davis progressed well, but
not enough right
for the 19th pick. And I'll say I always go back to my guy was Owusu Koromoa, who's with the Browns having this great year, because I felt like that guy his play on film. It's always you go by film, and that guy's film was terrific, just better.
John Keim still trying to get in the front office.
Listen, well, because
Josh Harris, if you're listening.
Listen, I got my resume right behind me here, so in the drawer. So, but it was also because for ESPN that was my pick, so I'm going to stick with that.
Of
but
course.
I did like the guy. So, and they're different linebackers, but he's very productive.
Yeah.
So he plays fast. That aside, this is not about me, Nikki.
It kind of is, though.
Well, it is. It is the John Keim report. And so, how many people can name it after themselves? So,
there you go.
Anyway, but I do, to them being in a better spot, I mean, you're going to go into the offseason, whoever comes here will be in a better spot because of the ownership change. And because you're going to have a better owner to work for, we believe. I mean, you can't have a worse one to work for. And you're going to have a lot of cap room. Yeah. Well, we were watching David Tepper melt down in Carolina, but they're going to have a lot of cap room with the ability to clear probably a good 15 million more just with a couple moves, possibly. So, possibly.
And they have 10 picks at this point or 9 picks with 5 in the 3 rounds.
Yeah. I mean, and so
possibly a number 2 pick after Sunday. Possibly.
And that's a problem. Like, we were talking about this earlier today. That's who the hell knows? Just pay attention to tankathon.com and we'll know during the games. Cause there's a few games that the strength of schedule is going to be, it's going to be like watching the stock market throughout the day. Is it up? Is it down? What's going on?
Right.
So, but
convoluted process. Can't we just do like the lottery, like the NBA? I know everybody hates that, but it's just so much easier. This makes me feel dumb every time I try to figure it out.
I kind of feel like that way a lot of times, no matter what's going on. But but I also wonder, Nikki, like what other kind of changes take place here? Because I think we're all expecting it, and as people there have been expecting the clean house phrase is what you hear. But even on the roster, what kind of turnover there will be, and how they view. And this is where the other thing, because you hear like even Rivera said that he expected to be better, and I think we all expected them to be better. Does that mean that the talent underachieved? Were they not used right? Do they have talent in place that they can turn it around quicker with the right people? I don't know. What do you think?
I think this is going to be a decision for the next GM and head coach, which is why they're probably going to get paid the big bucks. But it is a lot, and there's not a ton of time to kind of figure it out, especially we were talking about this earlier. If they pursue a GM or a coach that's, goes deep into the playoffs, that's more time that they don't have to waste. And trying to
us if that happens too.
Yeah. And trying to evaluate the roster. Plus you think about, if you have a new head coach coming in, this doesn't really mean much in terms of roster building, but the season comes quick. I mean, off-season workouts for teams that have new head coaches is April 1st. And if you have a number 2 pick, you're probably looking at a quarterback. They have a lot of due diligence to do. And you have to decide, what does that mean for your personnel department? Are you going to keep that in place through the draft? Do you want to give your new GM a chance to redo it entirely and get up to speed and get everybody on the same page in time for the draft? There's a ton to do.
Yes.
And then what about the business side? That's it.
Yeah.
I still think I've heard that maybe they focus on football first. I know that is a priority. Get the football
Right.
side in shape and then kind of do business as you go. It could mean that, a lot of changes that they want to make there could come next year,
Correct.
but football is a priority.
Football is a priority because they have to do that right
They
now.
have to do that
And
now.
how lucky are we, Nikki, that we get to cover? So for a reporter, the two worst words after the season are coach search, because
Yes.
it's exhausting. Then you
Yes.
throw on GM search,
Yep.
possibly a vice president of football, whatever. It could be
Yep.
another title in there
It's
somewhere.
everybody
Yeah. And then a quarterback. So like it's
the
like the
trifecta.
triple.
We
Yeah.
hit the trifecta.
And how lucky
And
are
then
we?
next
Because
off
like
season, we can do the business side. It'll be great.
right, and which is good because we've had nothing to write about the last couple
Yeah.
off seasons, aside from investigations with Congress and a sale and the pandemic and all that. Otherwise, very little to write about. So I'm
Yeah.
glad that we
God
have an off.
forbid this team normalize.
Yes, and it's been, like what I've wanted all the time is just like just give us everything to do in the off season. but
Yes.
but
Right.
I will say, it's going to transform this organization. And to your point, like it's going to be so different, and there is a lot to get done in a short period of time. And Joshua wanted to know, and this will be a hard one to answer, but I wanted to ask because I think people want to know how soon after Monday do you think new ownership gets a new GM locked down? And I think it's hard to know because one thing I'll say, and we talked about this, but like they've been pretty secretive and mum about what's going on. I think it's how they like to operate, but I also think it's part of it. They have people in place for these jobs. I don't think they want to create a situation where names are being leaked while people are in those jobs. So, but so I guess it just depends, but you kind of want to get that person in sooner rather than later, because the ideal thing for them, Nikki, is that they want the GM to hire the coach.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, they can start interviewing people on January 8th, that Monday. And they've done their due diligence going in, but playoffs could hinder it, especially if they're looking somebody that is deep in the playoffs. They can agree to it, but they can't obviously come in until they're done. But you have to follow league rules, and you have to have a certain number and type of interviews, and you have to go through, and that doesn't happen overnight. There is the Rooney rule. You have to make sure you give everybody a fair chance in who you're interviewing. So there's that to consider as well. So I think they want this to go as quickly as they can. I don't think this is something they want to drag out because there is competition. There are at least a handful, if not more, teams that are vying for some of the same talent possibly. So if they wait too long, if they drag it out, they're going to lose.
Yeah, and that's the problem. And it's not just getting the head coach in here eventually. It's that person getting their staff too, because sometimes it takes a little bit of time to put that together. Now, a lot of these guys will have talked to people. Like if you're Ben Johnson, I'm quite sure he's got an idea of who he wants to be on his staff.
Yes.
And it's something
these are conversations that are going on anyway.
Yeah.
The guys that are the top candidates know what's coming, and they can get a plan in place.
And just for the record, he has not asked me to be on his staff, Nikki. So I can put that rumor to rest.
Wow.
But I
Can I
do,
put it out in the Washington Post according to a person with knowledge of the situation.
There you go. But that is a part of it because, one of the things that you learn pretty early on, but you certainly reinforced over the years is I don't care who you get as a head coach or a coordinator, it's the quality of their staff that's going to matter. Just like if you don't have the right owner, whoever you get below him is not going to matter because the owner is going to screw it up or not hire the right people. But if you don't, and you need to have people who can carry out your vision for a team, for an offense, for whatever, and make sure it all fits. So if you don't get that guy, then it can hinder your staff initially. And I would think that, clearly we're going to expect some change in front office, but typically they're going to keep scouts around through the draft. And I would be curious to see if they do the same thing again this time because their contract's simply going to go around that time. So, and it's some level of continuity because you're going to want to have somebody here to at least interview for GM or coach on the staff. Even I don't know that they'll fire everybody right away, because you're going to want some people around who you can pick their brain, and maybe you want to keep them, but you need to get information on these players and what they think, right?
Yeah, no, totally. And I keep muting because Joey's barking up a storm. He's not happy about something. He wants to be on the staff.
Listen,
yeah.
he doesn't like 4-12 either.
No, not at all. I mean, unless it involves treats. But yeah, and I think these last 4 years have been that perfect example. Joey, stop. But you look at the staff, and we talked about it earlier, it was built on loyalty and familiarity, and so many coaches do it. You bring in the folks you're confident can do the job as you want, but you get to a point where a lot of it is you're just kind of repeating a lot of the same things you did years ago, and the game has passed you by. And I think sometimes, you need to be uncomfortable a little bit, right? And I think that's one of the things that was missing, during Ron's tenure. So yeah, building the staff is key. And it may not work on the first iteration too. Having the right ownership to allow you to tweak that is important.
And it may not work for Josh Harris, the first hire. We don't know if this is going to work. I do think eventually, and he would tell like guys that he's hired in the past, like Daryl Morey, like your consistent approach wins. Like, and Morey told me one time, is like, if you're playing blackjack, you're going to hit on 11. You may not hit, you might get a 2 or 3. You're going to hit every time. So over time, you're going to win by doing that. And so like, that's the whole key. But, I think for this fan base, you kind of want to hit it out of the park right away. Because I don't know that, I don't know how much you can expect this fan base to take. They've been coming back. They were at the games when it mattered. And you're going to have to sell more than if you want to sell tickets in the future. You got rid of the owner, you're changing the staff. You got to sell more hope, and you got to sell W's. So I think that's something that, that they have to do. Now, a question about Sunday, because God bless Sean Garner that it still matters to you, Sean, but who do you think starts, Brissett or Howell? So a little bit of curveball here, talking about the game. How dare you? We don't know yet. Nicki asked today of Ron, and they don't know. And,
I'm guessing. I'm just guessing. I don't know. I haven't heard anything. If I had to guess now, I would say Howell, but I don't know. They could totally switch it up. He had the 2 picks, not great, but he did play decently for 2 quarters. Just let him finish it out.
And, and the other thing, if you're Jacoby Brissett and that hamstring is not 100%.
Yeah.
I don't want to
free agency. He don't want to do that.
Yeah. And you're facing Micah Parsons in that group. Not a great way to go out if you're Jacoby Brissett. So I think there you go. And Randy Barnes wants to know, why is no one talking about Bo Nix, the most experienced QB in the draft? Well, we just did. There you go. I think, listen, there are a lot of high profile guys in this draft that are going to be looked at ahead of him. I do think that Bo Nix will be one of those guys as they get into the process. People are going to kind of like say, hey, don't forget about Bo Nix, because he's done a nice job. I also wonder how many people will still remember unfortunately for him, the Auburn years, but he's done a really nice job out west. So I think he will get talked about, but right now he's not going to go in the top 10. That's who we're talking about now. And then like Penix is playing and looking great. That's why he's going to be talked.
Unbelievable night.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm quite sure he's probably motivated from a few of us going to that game against Utah when we were out in Seattle. I mean, he probably noticed that.
Yeah. And he probably wants to go from Washington to Washington,
And I've always liked that kid. When he was in Indiana, I liked him, but the thing that will scare me always with him is the health. But that's where, I think if he goes to Senior Bowl and people are going to really like him, and then you get the combine and check out those medicals, but 2 torn ACLs is going to be really tough for some teams to forget. So where would you pick a guy like that? And what do you do? But that kid can play.
Yeah.
And I hope next week he plays really well. So, there you go. But is there anything else for Sunday that you're looking for? I mean, I say this, and I brought him up too, but there are a couple guys that I've enjoyed watching over the last, Sam Cosmi's been terrific.
I think he's played very well. He's been their best lineman, I think, this season, hands down. Um,
Yeah. Is that
but it's not even close, but you know,
but
yeah,
I think he's really
he's
improved.
probably been their best draft pick over the past 4 years, even though they drafted him as a tackle and moved him inside. I was trying to think of somebody who's been consistently better.
I think Cam Curl's been very consistent. But I think Cosme, he is an absolute keeper. And what I like about him is that, there was clearly an adjustment for him early. I think he had to get used to how to set as a guard versus as a tackle. And it's a different set, and you could get driven back a little bit more if you're not doing it. I think he's improved with that. And it's like he's a really good run blocker. I mean, plus, like the way he's grown out his hair, he now looks like a caveman guard. And I think he can get there next year.
Yes. He said he's going to shave his beard, though. I don't know how I feel about that. I'm going to see if that's a negotiation.
I think if he shaves it, you got to fine him, because I think it's it's a really good look for a guard. And I think like between he and John Ridgway, I think you could have 2 stars if this team ever becomes good.
I think no beard lowers your market value. So I might tell him that.
Well, it's because he wants to grow out his hair too. If he had like really long hair and the beard, it's a good look for a guard.
As long as you only have like this much of like, face showing, like all hair in back, all hair in front. So it's just like your eye showing. I think that's the way to go. Definitely.
But he's been really good. Quan Martin, I think, has played well over the last several weeks.
Quite well.
I like him. But is there anything in particular that really you're going to look for on Sunday other than the final clock?
Not really. How soon can we get out of there so we can be back in Ashburn for locker room cleanup?
Right. Because
But I mean, honestly, the only other thing I'll be looking for post game is where's Josh Harris, and where's Ron Rivera, which is sad, but that's a reality at this point. So
I mean,
there's still plenty at stake for both teams. I mean, the Cowboys are clawing for the division title, and the Commanders, it means more for their future than anybody currently on the team. But and no player's going to tank. I know fans say that no player's going to go out there and tank. They'll get killed if they go out there and tank. But they're the number 2 pick is pretty enticing out there. So
yes, and listen, what I'm going to watch
to get it though, so it's not like they can just go out there and tank and it's guaranteed.
Right.
So.
I mean, New England can still but if it's like fourth quarter, third quarter, and maybe you see if does Josh Harris get on the phone in the box and no. But yeah, like for Josh Harris, like, I mean, clearly we know players and coaches want to win, but I think that second pick right now is pretty damn valuable, and you want that option going forward. And so, there's going to be a dual thing here, but I mean, you still have you're going to have a lot of young guys get on put some good film out there on Sunday. And I think that's always like, I like watching guys who get a chance. It's kind of like some of those preseason games where it's like, oh, the games don't matter, but I like watching who comes through in that situation. Like last year, Khaleke Hudson finished really well. And I think it helped him earn a spot for this year, because they felt, now would like to have seen him maybe a little bit more. And he's been playing a lot since Rivera took over as DC, but I think it helped him with how he finished. And so does somebody finish like that where you can say, okay, is it Quan Martin, that guy, and I would like to have seen Chris Rodriguez get a little bit more work. I'd like to see Brian Robinson get a lot more work next year. So, but that's that'll be for like August training camp talk. So
wouldn't that be something if Kyle Smith and Taylor Heineke can knock Washington to number 3? Because the Atlanta-New Orleans game has significant weight. The draft slot. That's pretty ironic, honestly.
I do wonder if Kyle would like that.
I have an idea.
Yes. And I think Taylor would probably be okay with that too. So although Taylor would have come back. So
is Taylor even going to play? Because he had the ankle and he wasn't playing well.
He's got the ankle. I think it's to be determined. So but anyways, well, if we're sitting here talking about Taylor Heineke and his ankle injury, I think it's probably time to go. Nicki, I appreciate you coming on as always. Tell people where they can find you. Besides
at WashingtonPost.com and on X at Nicki Jhabvala, NickijHabvala, and on Instagram. But I just post. Don't follow me on Instagram. I just post photos of my dog. Save yourself.
But if you want to match the face with the bark, go to Instagram.
Where is he, Joseph? Oh, he left. He had his chance. He had his chance.
But is Joseph what you call him when you're angry with him? Is that like, yeah, because like you have,
yeah. I did not
yeah.
give my dog biblical names. His name is Joey. Joey and Louie. Lewis when he's bad, but yes.
There you go. See, and it was when I was bad as John William. So
yeah,
that's when I knew I was in trouble. So
that's
anyways, Nicki.
why I am the way I am.
Another piece of the puzzle. Thanks for coming on, Nicki, and thanks everybody for tuning in. I'll be back on Thursday with another podcast talking about the future, and not Sunday, but beyond Sunday. So thanks a lot, and I'll talk to you next time.